Okay, here we are, Module 6. This is the last module for Chapter 17 and the last module for your class in lifespan development. Hard to believe that we're here already, but we are. So we're going to wrap up this semester talking about grief work and coping. So let's talk about what is the GriefWorks perspective. Well, the idea here is that in order to cope adaptively with death, the bereaved people must confront their loss. They have to experience these painful emotions and then work through those emotions and move towards kind of a detachment from the deceased. So the idea is kind of this almost kettle pot, right? That you've heated up and it's about to blow. If you don't process this loss, it's going to back up on you. Denial. Oh, if he doesn't get over the denial, it's going to really blow up at some point in the future. So that was kind of the idea. But what they found is one, it could be a culturally biased belief. The Shinto religion in Japan and many other kind of religions and cultures actually have ancestral kind of worship and where they keep those connections well beyond when the person has died. And there doesn't seem to be any negative ramifications of a type of belief like that. So there's a lot of different ways to grieve. And to suggest that the grief work model is the only way is a bit presumptuous on our part. The fact that you're confronting these very painful emotions may not really be helpful, and it could actually cause more distress than leaving it alone and letting people kind of process things more naturally. And delayed grief reaction, which is really why this whole GriefWorks perspective developed, was the idea that we're trying to prevent future problems. And it's not really supported by the research. Repressing painful emotions so that one can get on with life may be actually more adaptive than working through them, because once again, that time can lessen the sting of it. And if you go ahead and have to kind of put that and repress it for a longer period of time until it becomes of a manageable intensity, then maybe that's okay. In other words, if somebody wants to bury themselves in work after they've lost somebody and people are like, oh, I can't believe they're not mourning, maybe it's just too painful. Maybe they have to do that to divert themselves from the loss until they can open that up again. So generally, the GriefWorks perspective has not been supported, but you may hear people that espouse it. So that's why we're going over it right now. So what about coping? Who succumbs to this grief and who is able to return? Well, Bowlby's attachment theory really emphasizes that early experiences in attachment relationships can influence how we later relate to others and handle loss of relationships. And so there it is again, right? It comes back to those secure relationships, that template that you form very early on in your life about who you are and the relationships that you have with other individuals. And if you have a secure one, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to handle that loss and get through it much more effectively than if you had an insecure attachment. So once again, as a parent, what is the best things you can do with your infant? Form that secure attachment, not just because of potential loss in the future, but we also talked about potential relationships going forward and just overall outcomes in the feeling that you are being supported in your life and that you're able to take risks and you also know what it is to recover from things. Of course, the closeness of one's relationship to the deceased relates to how hard the grieving is. With grieving for attachment figures, for people who we haven't had. So, in other words, those we've been attached to are going to have a lot more difficulty getting over someone's death than those that we really haven't attached to. It's the difference between mom and dad dying and great uncle Mort, who you know and have seen every now and then, but really not having the same level of attachment. So that loss is not going to be as influential. The cause of death is going to influence bereavement. And so, not only the cause, but the immediacy that happens, the shock value of it, an auto accident where someone dies and was healthy versus a long drawn out, like Alzheimer's. very different reactions that are going to predict how you cope and how you maybe succumb to things. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise, but strong social support is so essential in being able to overcome. And we see that in the resiliency literature. That social support can help us get through various obstacles in life, and it can help us overcome these great losses of life. Now, other times there could be additional life stressors, and that it could be very detrimental to people being able to cope with that death. So let's say the major breadwinner in the family dies, and with the rest of the family, that puts them in financial straits. So then they have to sell their house, they have to get rid of some of their cars, and they have a reduction in the standard of living. So the surviving spouse not only has now to care for the children by themselves, but they also have to deal with reduced financial circumstances and all the stressors that come with it. So you can imagine that makes it very hard because this person's dealing with the loss themselves, and then they have all these other stressors kind of piled up on them. So that can certainly predict the outcomes. Now, for those people who are able to go on, and that's the vast majority of people, there can be positive changes associated with overcoming hardship, because the death of ones who are the most close to you, the loved ones, is arguably one of the hardest experiences that individuals have to go through. And so when you get on the other side of that, a year or two later, and you're beginning to feel normal again, that sense of loss, those pangs of grief have really begun to diminish. You can see that a lot of bereaved people have some positive outcomes. They become more confident because they know, if I can deal with this, I can deal with almost anything else that's going to come into my life. They become more family oriented. They understand what's important in life, and family relationships typically are ones that are going to take precedent. Maybe more open to others and kind of see through the minor things in life, the things that really just don't matter in the big span of things. They may seem important, but frankly don't, compared to some of these other major things. And death has a way of really clarifying that type of attitude. You can see them become more religious, and also having just a greater appreciation for life, knowing that's what happens when that gets taken away. Okay. So that's post-traumatic growth, and that's a real area of research now in trying to understand that, and not just the death and dying portion. So where we're going to end is talking about palliative care. Now, what palliative care is care that's aimed primarily at bringing comfort to and meeting the physical, psychological, and spiritual needs of patients with serious illnesses. The best known of those is hospice. And that hospice is a program that supports dying people and their families through a philosophy of really caring rather than curing. So the dying person and their family decide what they need. And most of the dying people want to live in their home. And so when medical efforts have nothing left to give, that's usually when palliative care and hospice is considered. Now, that even if the person is not able to live in their home, they live in a hospice center, which is tried to be made as home-like as possible, less like a hospital. Nobody usually says they want to die in a hospital. They usually want to die where they're most comfortable, which is either at home or in a place that resembles kind of a home-like setting. So there really is no attempt to cure. It's to de-emphasize prolonging life, but pain control is emphasized. So it's a quality of life issue there. And the bereavement counseling is offered to the entire family so that they are more able to adjust to the loss as it comes. What they found is that there's really positive outcomes in regards to this, a very dignified way for death and dying, and to treat it in an upfront manner, and then hopefully anticipating when issues maybe arise from the loss. So with palliative care, that wraps up our chapter 17 and the end of the semester. I certainly hope that you have enjoyed the course and have learned a lot about the lifespan. I certainly hope to see you all in class at some point in the future in person, if we can, but realizing we really couldn't this semester. So good luck on all of your finals and all of your classes. And like I said, it was a real pleasure to have you in class, and take care.